and we will conquer Rome.
And just 2 months ago, ISIS also threatened Rome in this propaganda video.
Security is always heightened around the Vatican, and Pope Francis has said that he knows he could be a target and fears for innocent crowds who come to see him.
There are lots of questions about the safety of Pope Francis. An Italian newspaper reports the Pope is the target of ISIS militants. El Tempo cites unidentified Israeli sources as saying they believe ISIS has the Pope, quote unquote, in the crosshairs. Senior Vatican analyst John Allen is here with me. And John Allen, how serious is this?
Well, look, I mean, at one level, given what's going on in the world, you can never completely dismiss the prospect of an ISIS threat against anyone, up to and including the Pope.
This isn't just anyone. This
isn't just anyone, quite right. However, that said, the Vatican publicly is very much playing this down, saying they don't believe this is serious, there's no climate of alarm, and that, of course, is in part because of the nature of the report itself. As you said, a report in an Italian newspaper citing unnamed sources in Israeli intelligence talking about a kind of hypothetical potential threat against the Pope. There's no suggestion of any hard intelligence that would tell you that a plot is actually imminent. Now, on the other hand, I can also guarantee you that the Vatican security people right now are having conversations with their opposite numbers in Italy, in the United States, and elsewhere about whether or not there might be some suggestion of something and what, common sense precautions they might want to take.
We were just talking in commercial break about, though, how fun it is to cover this Pope and how accessible this Pope is and how he, often walks amongst the people. And so even though the Vatican may be saying we need to, ratchet up security because of this threat, do you think that would actually happen?
Well, I said immediately after Francis was elected that the whole world may be charmed by him. The one constituency that is not is his security detail. Like, I can tell you for sure, sales of heart pills at the Vatican pharmacy went through the roof, in the first couple of months. Now, look, he has gotten better. The argument that was made to him that worked is not that you're putting yourself at risk. Frankly, that doesn't cut a lot of ice with him. The argument that worked was you're making life more difficult for the people who are charged with keeping you safe.
Okay.
And that moved him. And so if we've seen in public the kind of evolution of Francis. He's much more willing to allow his security detail to get in place before he hops off the Jeep or plunges into a crowd.
He is. That's what we don't see. That's what we're not aware of.
He's more willing to, when people want to hand him things, he makes sure that one of the security guys goes through it, does a kind of cursory examination before he takes it and stuff like that. Now, that said, look, keeping any world leader right now safe is a hard job. Keeping this world leader safe, this kind of spontaneous, let it all hang out kind of people's Pope, it's an especially challenging task.
فإن الدولة بفضل الله وحده تزداد قوة يوما بعد يوم فهذا بنيانها يرتفع وهذه ساريتها شاخصة وتلك رايتها عالية مرفرفة لم تنقطع منذ التأسيس بفضل الله صولاتها ولن تتوقف بإذن الله غاراتها حتى يدق الصليب ويقتل الخنزير وتوضع الجزية ولا تكون في الأرض فتنة ويكون الدين كله لله.
Let me tell you something. When we come back, these gentlemen knew the Pope was going to resign before the Vatican knew, before the world knew. They knew the year. They knew the month. Tom had a download from heaven. That's how he knew that. But Tom had a new download from heaven, never been revealed before, about the Middle East. You must understand this. We'll be right back. Tom, Pope Francis, you told me he's very interested in the supernatural. Tell me about it.
Yeah, he absolutely is. In fact, we haven't had a pope in recent memory that has talked so much about the reality of the devil and talking about prophecy. He's more than twice highly recommended a book called The Lord of the World. This was written in the 1900s, and it's an apocalyptic vision of the end times that actually includes the role of the Pope and the Vatican and what role they will play in the rise of the Antichrist. He knows what all Jesuits know, that he is Pope number 100 112 in the prophecy of the popes, which is something that's been held in high esteem
So he
since
knows
forever.
that he's supposed to be assassinated?
My suspicion is that he may know that because, you know, the prophecy of the Pope says that Rome will be destroyed and all of that we talked about once before. And he has said publicly, he has said, I don't think I'm going to be around very long. It might only be 2 or 3 years. 2016 will be his third year in office. He even recently said, I would be willing to be assassinated. I just hope it doesn't hurt. This guy is talking like a guy who understands that he is playing a role in prophecy. You know, the Pope is coming to the United States.
Yeah, next week.
Next week. He's speaking before the United Nations. He's speaking before a joint session of the U.S. Congress. This sounds like a page out of a Left Behind novel or something.
He's coming to the White House.
Yep.
Okay, you had another download. Your track record is amazing on what God tells you. What did God reveal to you this time?
Yeah. I've never before been willing to talk about this kind of stuff publicly because you need people that can believe, that operate in the supernatural, that understand the difference between fraud and real, and we don't have a whole lot around, so I've always just kind of stayed in my shell and shared it privately with people close to me. This time, we are preparing to make a prediction.
Do it right now.
It'll be the biggest one we've ever made before. Him and I are working on the 400 pages of it, but here it is in a nutshell, that the Islamic nation is going to use a weapon of mass destruction. This is all going to start happening within the next 48 months. But here's the thing. It's going to play out in ways people don't see.
Tell me.
In that when it happens, Pope Francis is going to call for the revitalization of the Christian rules for just war. That's a very important statement. It's part of deep theology. Well, it means that we can justify fighting a war if we can meet certain criterion that are outlined by both Catholic and evangelical theologians. You have to meet certain criterion. He's going to call for that, but the Islamic nation is going to see that as a fulfillment of their 450-year-old hadith, which says that at the end times they would go to war against the army of Rome. And people have thought,
but Rome doesn't have a big army.
They're going to, because there's going to be a coalition army. It's going to be made up of the United States, United Nations, Britain, Muslim countries are going to come in, but they're going to see their Christian justification for this war through this call by the Pope, and that's why the Muslims are going to see this as a new crusade, the final crusade, a battle against the armies of Rome.
The Vatican, in a rare move, says that it will support the use of airstrikes against ISIS militants, and that breaks a long-standing position of disapproving war. They released this statement: military action might be necessary, and, quote, intervention now, before it is too late. Joining me now is Francis Campbell, former British ambassador to the Vatican. Sir, welcome. Good to have you with us tonight.
Thank you, Martha.
How significant is this move and this statement by the Vatican?
Martha, it's a very significant development. As you know, the Vatican and the late Pope John Paul II was firmly against the war in Iraq in 2003. This is a very significant development, but it's in line with basic Catholic teaching that in order to preserve peace and justice, force may well have to be used. And the words coming out of the Vatican over the last 48 hours are indeed very serious. A letter from Pope Francis to the UN Secretary General, asking the UN Secretary General and the international community to use all the mechanisms and international law at the UN's disposal to actually help avert this crisis, to help tackle it. And that includes perhaps a Chapter 7 operation, which would be peace enforcement, not peacekeeping, but peace enforcement.
What does that mean,
the
Chapter 7 agreement?
Yes, that is correct. But what has gone on here, and what I think is alarming to the Vatican and indeed to a lot of Christians and a lot of people worldwide, is why this situation has been allowed to reach this stage. ISIS went into Mosul 2 months ago. On the 18th of July, they issued an ultimatum to Christians on the 18th of July to either pay a tax, convert, or to face the sword. So we do have a crisis at the moment on a mountain, but we also have ISIS currently in control of major towns in northern Iraq, where there were, or indeed perhaps are, significant religious minorities, including Christians.
And what are the other things that I'm sorry, I just want to ask you this question. You know, in terms of Muslims, there's a call from the Vatican to moderate Muslims to rise up against this group as well, is there not?
That is correct. The Vatican's Interfaith Department issued a statement 2 days ago basically calling on people, in particular Muslim leaders, to show unity and to step forward and to condemn this in really unambiguous terms. And I think that is essential to actually show that interfaith dialogue is alive and well, that ISIS, numbering perhaps 15 to 16,000 fighters, some of them coming from Europe, that they do not represent Islam. They do not represent dialogue between religions, and they need to be roundly condemned by all religious leaders, and that's what the Vatican is looking for.
Francis Campbell, thank you very much.
Queridos hermanos, la desunión es una herida en el cuerpo de la Iglesia de Cristo. Y nosotros no queremos que esa herida permanezca. La desunión es obra del padre de la mentira, del padre de la discordia, que siempre busca que los hermanos estén divididos. Hoy reunidos, yo desde Roma y ustedes allí, pediremos para que el Padre envíe el Espíritu de Jesús, el Espíritu Santo, y nos dé la gracia de que todos sean uno, para que el mundo crea. Y me viene a la mente decir algo que puede ser una insensatez. Quizás una herejía, no sé.
I don't know about you, friends, but when I hear the Pope say in advance, I'm about to say something that might be controversial or perhaps even heretical, I usually sit up, I want to know what is the Pope going to say that even he admits might be heretical.
Pero hay alguien que sabe que pese a las diferencias somos uno. Y es el que nos persigue.
So here he's saying there's someone who knows we're one and he's persecuting us. It's the devil who's causing this persecution. Now the Pope is beginning to allude to Christians that are being killed simply because they're Christians, most of which is happening because of the conflict with Islam and ISIS in particular. And these things may be accelerating, probably will, in the days ahead.
El que persigue hoy día a los cristianos, que nos unge con el martirio, sabe que los cristianos son discípulos de Cristo.
So again, the Pope is saying here that the devil is anointing Christians with martyrdom. And I think as you see terrorism increase in incidents of Christians being persecuted and killed and beheaded by the growing and mounting controversy between Islam, or at least radical Islam, and Christianity, this is going to have a polarizing influence for Christians. And the Pope is setting himself at the middle of that right now, calling Christians to unite under the banner of Catholicism to resist this persecution of Christians globally.
Que son uno, que son hermanos. No le interesa si son evangélicos, ortodoxos, luteranos, católicos, apostólicos, no le interesa. Son cristianos.
So you notice this is really amazing that the Pope is saying it doesn't matter whether you're Orthodox, Apostolic, Lutheran, Evangelical, Catholic, that the devil views all Christians as just one enemy. And so since he views it that way, we need to just come together and to set aside our doctrinal differences and be united, since we're going to be baptized by this common baptism of persecution and martyrdom. This sort of paints a picture of what we can expect in the future. I think that there's more in prophecy than we may have understood regarding a conflict between Christianity and Islam in the days ahead, and that this is going to have a polarizing influence on Christians. That, along with other natural or financial disasters, the world's going to be shaken, and everybody's going to run to the leader of the Catholic Church as the spiritual leader.
Y esa sangre se junta. Hoy estamos viviendo, queridos hermanos, el ecumenismo de la sangre.
He speaks here now about an ecumenism of blood.